In this video, we're doing another Key comic book spotlight, this time on Frank Castle, the Punisher. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're doing another Key comic book spotlight, this time on the Punisher. Now, if you're new to my channel or this series, what I typically do with Key comic book spotlight is pick a notable superhero or supervillain and just point out 5 Key and or Grail comic books that the comic book collecting community often pursues when they're fans of this character. So this video isn't here necessarily to identify Spec, but help new comic book collectors or old ones find out a little bit about their favorite superhero. And in this one, we're going to be doing the Punisher. But before I get into the 5 books for today, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying my content, help support the channel, love interacting with you guys, do one of those things, and I would appreciate it. All right, that being said, let's get into the books for today. And, the Punisher, what a great character. Frank Castle, just an absolutely classic A-tier superhero. And, I picked out a few great books that I think are going to be great for discussion with this video today. So let's get right into it here. And let's talk about, of course, his first appearance, which is going to be Amazing Spider-Man 129. And that's this book right here, in case you've never seen it before. The Punisher made his first appearance in 1974 in the Amazing Spider-Man run. And what a landmark appearance it was. I mean, look at this cover. I mean, absolutely classic. And this is a book that is really interesting to me because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the time period. Maybe it's just people's, fanaticism about the Punisher character. Maybe it's the fact that, this one occurs in the, sort of the A-tier run of Amazing Spider-Man. But for whatever reason, this book just absolutely exploded as far as its values in the market right now. I mean, everybody wants to get their hands on Amazing Spider-Man 129. It's kind of like, in the way that everybody wants to get their hands on Incredible Hulk 181 for Wolverine. The first appearance of the Punisher just seems like, anyone who has a great comic book collection should have Amazing Spider-Man 129 in their collection. And for that reason, the numbers have gone absolutely bonkers. So if we dig into the numbers here, you'll see on the high end, there is a 9.8 on the census, and that's sold in December of 2020 for $13,500. And then at the low end here, Go Collect would suggest that, these low end comic books are selling for the $100, $200 mark. But kind of what I was inferring with, earlier saying that anybody in the comic book collecting community wants their hands on this book. I mean, I think you would be really hard pressed to ever find this book for lower than $400, $500, $600. I mean, that's the, the type of numbers that this thing commands, and for good reason. I mean, I just think Punisher is also like Spider-Man, like, X-Men, Daredevil, etc. Punisher is one of the few kind of Marvel characters that has been able to command, an ongoing series for many, many, many years, because there's such a fervor for him as a character, and there's such an audience that love this character. And, when and if we ever get the Punisher in the MCU, I can only imagine what the desirability is going to be for a character like him in the books, that he has in his historic run. Because, once he is fully established in pop culture, sky's the limit for a character like the Punisher. So Amazing Spider-Man 129, first appearance of the Punisher, very, very, very hot book. And, definitely one that would be great if you are a fan of the Punisher. All right, let's go on now to my second book pick here. My second pick is actually going to be Marvel Preview number 2. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is the origin of the Punisher. And why did I point this one out in particular? Because this is kind of a unique one, being that it's a Marvel Preview Presents. But one of the things that drew me to this book was that because it's the origin, I feel like next to Spider-Man, the Punisher has one of the most iconic origin backstories that is core to his character. Knowing the fact that his family was, murdered by, a group of mercenaries, and that now he's driven to enact punishment upon all of those, evil doers and drug dealers and mercenaries and etc. All the crime out there. And that I feel like is just core to his character. And for that reason, his origin story is everything. And, we've seen it time and time again in the various Punisher movies that have been out there, or the Netflix shows. His family and his wife being murdered is such a huge part of his character that I had to talk about Marvel Preview Presents The Punisher. Not to mention that I actually just think that this is such a unique book in its own right. I mean, there you see the Punisher up in the title, which actually is one of the first times you're ever going to see the Punisher, because this book came out in 1974 on the title. And also the art on this book is very unique. It still has kind of a cartoony comic book art, but it has almost more of a weird sort of movie poster aesthetic that is different for a comic book. So for that reason, it is kind of special in my mind. So as we dig into the numbers here, we'll see on the high end for a 9.8, there's one that was sold in February of 2021 for $1,000. So this book actually has recently eclipsed the $1,000 mark, which is, a pretty significant milestone for it. And on the low end here, you're not going to find too many CGCs, but typically speaking, when I go onto eBay and search this book, you're going to find this book around that $70, $75, $80 mark, depending on what kind of grade you can find. All right, with that said, let's go on now to the next book here. My third pick is actually going to be The Punisher #1 from 1986. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is the first solo limited series for The Punisher. So one of the first times you're going to see the name The Punisher in title form on a traditional comic book, not to be confused with the Marvel Preview one, but a traditional one here. And this one I feel like is really, really underrated and undervalued. I mean, the Punisher is such a beloved character, and this is his first limited series. It's kind of like similar to how Wolverine had his first limited series, and I would even argue that that book is underrated for what it is as well. And this one, similarly, is a great sort of, putting Punisher into the spotlight, because remember, when the Punisher was introduced, he was actually hunting Spider-Man. So he was the first kind of anti-hero in that sense. That's kind of what made him so revolutionary in a way. So for here, Marvel kind of took like an interesting gamble with rolling the dice on the Punisher here, because they're putting this kind of anti-hero in his own sort of comic book form to see, how he performed. And, I guess his character really, really took, and this was the book that would sort of launch his series, which I will talk about in a minute. But before I go into the next book, let's dig into the numbers here. As you can see, there is a 9.8 on the census that sold for $575 back in March. And then on the bottom, you're not going to find too many CGC numbers, but again, this is a book that I see on eBay going for that $40, $50 mark, depending on what kind of book you find. But Punisher #1 of the limited series, I do think has a huge ceiling, especially if we ever see the Punisher in the MCU. All right, let's go on now to the fourth pick here. And the fourth pick is going to be, you guessed it, The Punisher #1, first ongoing series from 1987. And why did I specifically talk this one? Well, this is the book that would go on to be sort of that legendary historic Punisher run. Granted, the Punisher run, unlike the Amazing Spider-Man one, has had different iterations throughout the years. But like I said at the beginning, Punisher is one of the few characters that has been able to kind of carry on a series that went into, the high hundreds of numbers. So that is an impressive feat. And this was the book that started it off for him. And, for me, as a person who grew up, in the kind of the Copper era, this to me is one of the most iconic covers when it comes to the Copper Age. I mean, seeing the Punisher holding the bazooka out of the window right there, I just have always loved this cover. And every time I see it, kind of brings back that nostalgia for me, has a special place in my mind and in my heart. And for that reason, I think that this is one of the great key comic books to own if you are a fan of the Punisher. So let's dig into the numbers here, and you will see on the high end, a 9.8 did sell back in March for $190, and you can see a lot of people actually starting to get their hands on these Punisher books, and great deals to be had, because when I see this one on eBay, you can find mint copies for that $15, $20, $25 mark if you're lucky and if you're patient. So this is a really, really cool book to get, and I think generally undervalued for what it currently is in the market, because if we do get Punisher in the MCU, this one's definitely going to rock it. All right, let's go on now to my last pick here. And my last pick is actually going to be a unique one. This one is actually Punisher #219 by Rosenberg. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is actually the first time that Punisher wears the War Machine armor. This is his first full appearance in the War Machine armor. And why did I point to this one? Well, this one to me just feels like it's a moment that is going to happen in the MCU soon. In some of these other key comic book spotlight videos, I've pointed to things like, Iron Man snapping his fingers with the Infinity Gauntlet, or Captain America wielding Mjolnir. Well, I have a feeling that when we get Punisher in the MCU, it just seems like we're going to get a moment where he suits up in some kind of War Machine armor, because these aesthetics that the Punisher has with the skull logo just feel like they fit in a War Machine type of armor. And I have a feeling that when we get him in the MCU, we're going to get some kind of moment like this. And aside from that, I also just think that this is just one of the most badass images I think that exists for the Punisher. I mean, just seeing him in the War Machine armor, I mean, this just feels like peanut butter and jelly to me. Like these two things belong together. So for that reason, I really, really love this book. And as you dig into the numbers here, you're going to see 9.8 is scratching that $100 mark. But, you know, this is a book that when I go onto eBay, you know, you don't see too many slabs, but at the same time, you are going to see this book being sold around that, you know, $15, $20 mark, just because the cover is so iconic and so amazing to look at. Well, that is all I have for this video. Those are my 5 key comic books for the Punisher. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Do you guys think that we're going to get the Punisher in the MCU at some point? I mean, I think that we are going to see that. I think John Bernthal has done a great job with that character, and I would love to see him along with Charlie Cox in the MCU soon. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's other Punisher books that you think are keys for his you know, historic run. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.